The morning my daughter nearly died, I was wearing my reading glasses and grading a stack of senior essays about the Great Gatsby. I remember the specific essay I was reading when my phone rang. A 17-year-old boy had written 2 pages arguing that Gatsby deserved what he got because he built his whole life on a lie. I had been about to write a note in the margin. Interesting, but consider the cost of that logic, when my phone buzzed against the kitchen table and everything I thought I understood about my own life rearranged itself permanently. My neighbor Paulette's number lit up the screen. Paulette is not a woman who calls unnecessarily. In 11 years of living across the street from each other, she has called me exactly 4 times. Once when a pipe burst under my porch. Once when my car lights were left on overnight. Once when her husband had his first heart attack and she needed someone to drive to the hospital because her hands wouldn't stop shaking. And this time, I answered on the first ring. Lorraine. Her voice had that particular careful flatness that people use when they are trying to deliver the worst news in the gentlest possible container. Desta's car is off Route 7. By the old Callaway fence line. She's hurt. You need to come right now. I did not ask how hurt. I did not ask what happened. I did not take off my reading glasses. I did not lock the back door. I did not check the stove, which I have checked every single day for 30 years without exception. I just drove. The Georgia August heat was already pressing down at 9 in the morning, the kind of thick, airless weight that turns the horizon into a shimmer. I drove Route 7 with both hands on the wheel and my reading glasses still on my face, and I told myself the same thing I have told myself in every crisis of my adult life. Falling apart is for after. Right now there are things to do. I saw Desta's car before I saw Desta. A blue sedan, driver's door hanging open, tilted at the shallow ditch angle that meant someone had pulled off fast or been forced off. And then I saw my daughter. She was sitting against the rear tire with her back against the car, one hand cradled against her chest, her head dropped forward. She was 7 months pregnant. Her blouse was torn at the sleeve. There was blood in her hair, dried already in the heat, dark and crackling at the edges. She looked up when she heard my car. I want to tell you about the expression on her face in that moment because I have thought about it every single day since, and I think it matters. It was not fear. It was not pain, though she was clearly in pain. It was relief. The specific, collapsing relief of someone who has been holding themselves together through sheer will for a long time, who has been telling themselves, just keep moving, and who finally sees the person they have been moving toward. She said, Mom. And I said, I'm here, baby. I've got you. And I meant it in every way a person can mean something. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. My name is Lorraine Hutchins. I am 61 years old, born and raised in Macon, Georgia, the oldest of 4 children in a household where resources were tight and expectations were not. My mother, Celestine Hutchins, was a postal worker for 34 years. My father, Elwood, drove long-haul trucks until his knees gave out, after which he became the most opinionated man at every church breakfast in Bibb County. They were both people who believed that the antidote to hardship was precision. You could not control what the world threw at you. You could control how organized, how documented, and how prepared you were when it arrived. I absorbed that early. I taught advanced placement English literature at Jefferson High School in Macon for 28 years. I graded approximately 14,000 essays in that time. I coached the debate team for 11 of those years. I chaperoned more field trips than I can count, including one to Atlanta that I will not discuss in detail except to say that I returned with every student I left with, which under the specific circumstances of that trip represented a genuine personal achievement. I raised 2 children, Desta and her older brother Marcus, largely on my own after their father, a man named Gerald who had many appealing qualities and one catastrophic flaw. He could not stay, left when Desta was 3 and Marcus was 7. Gerald sends birthday cards. He has never missed a birthday card in 28 years. I give him that. I raised them the way my parents raised me. Precision. Documentation. Preparation. I kept records of everything. Medical records, school records, financial records. I have a filing system in my home office that my children consider excessive and that has saved us, on 3 separate occasions, from situations that would have been genuinely catastrophic without it. I am telling you all of this because you need to understand what Beverly Whitmore was dealing with when she decided that my daughter was an acceptable casualty. She thought I was just a retired schoolteacher. She did not know about the filing system. Desta met Daniel Whitmore at a mutual friend's birthday dinner in Savannah, which is where Desta had moved after graduate school. She called me the next morning. She never calls the next morning after a date. Usually I hear about these things weeks later in carefully edited summaries, and she said, "Mom, I think I met someone serious." I said, "How do you know?" She said, "Because he asked me what I was reading, and when I told him, he had actually read it too. And not to impress me, he'd read it 3 years ago and had opinions about it." I said, "What was the book?" She said, "Their eyes were watching God." I said, "Marry him." She laughed, but she did. Daniel Whitmore is a quiet, careful man who builds custom furniture in a workshop behind the house he owns outside Savannah. He is 34 years old, lean and deliberate in the way of people who work with their hands and have learned to measure twice. He has what I can only describe as structural integrity. You can see it in the way he builds things and the way he keeps his word. When he tells you he will do something, it gets done. When he tells you he does not know something, he means it. He is not performing humility. I liked him from the first dinner. The Whitmore family is another matter. Not in its entirety. Daniel's aunt on his mother's side, a woman named Claudette, is one of the warmest people I have ever met and makes a sweet potato pie that I think about in quiet moments. But the core of the family, which in practical terms meant Beverly Whitmore, Daniel's mother, operated on a different frequency entirely. Beverly Whitmore was 63 years old when Desta and Daniel married. She had been widowed at 58 when Daniel's father, Raymond Whitmore Sr., died after a long illness. Raymond had built the family's timber and land operation over 40 years of disciplined, unglamorous work, buying parcels when nobody else wanted them, managing the timber rights carefully, reinvesting instead of spending. By the time he died, the Whitmore holdings included a 300-acre parcel outside Waynesboro that had appraised at $2.4 million, 3 smaller tracts, and a modest but healthy operating account. Beverly had managed the family's bookkeeping since the early years of their marriage. It was her domain, and Raymond had trusted her with it completely. That trust, as it turned out, had been catastrophically misplaced. But I didn't know that yet. At the wedding, Beverly smiled at Desta with a warmth that seemed genuine. She held Desta's hands before the ceremony and said, "I am so happy you're joining this family." She cried at the reception, real tears, or what looked like real tears. I watched her the whole time. I watched her hands. I watched her eyes when she thought nobody was looking at her. I cannot tell you exactly what I saw, because it was not anything specific. It was more like a frequency, a particular quality of attention that Beverly paid to Desta that felt, to me, less like affection and more like surveillance. I said nothing. Desta would have told me I was projecting. Maybe I was. I opened my notebook when I got home that night, and I wrote 3 words at the top of a fresh page. Watch Beverly Whitmore. The campaign began subtly enough that if I hadn't been paying attention, I might have missed it entirely. It started at the first family Thanksgiving, 3 months after the wedding. Desta had spent 2 days preparing a dish, a jollof rice recipe handed down from my mother, Celestine, who had learned it from her own grandmother, a dish that carried our family's history in every ingredient. Desta brought it to the Whitmore family table with quiet pride. Beverly looked at it, smiled pleasantly, and said, "How interesting. We usually do more traditional sides at Thanksgiving, but it's lovely that you wanted to contribute something." Something. Not something wonderful. Not something special. Something. Desta told me about it later, casually, the way she tells me things she is trying to minimize. I wrote it in the notebook. The next incident was at Christmas. Beverly gave all of the family members personalized gifts, a custom piece from Daniel's workshop for his aunt, a piece of jewelry for a cousin, an engraved watch for a nephew. For Desta, she gave a gift card to a home goods store with a note that read, "So, you can choose something you like for the house." Desta smiled and said thank you. I wrote it in the notebook. Then there was the family photograph incident, which Desta did not tell me about. I heard it from Daniel's Aunt Claudette, who called me out of the blue 6 months into the marriage and said, with the careful tone of a woman who feels she is reporting something important but doesn't want to be the cause of conflict, "Lorraine, I want you to know that at the family reunion in June, Beverly had a family portrait taken without Desta. She said Desta had gone to get drinks and they couldn't wait for the photographer, but Desta was standing 15 feet away and Beverly didn't call her over. I thanked Claudette. I told her I appreciated her telling me. I wrote it in the notebook. I called Desta that evening and asked, without context, how the reunion had gone. Fine, Desta said. It was fine. She paused. Beverly had a family picture taken while I was getting lemonade, she said. I don't think she meant anything by it. Of course not, I said. I wrote. She knew exactly what she meant by it. Raymond Whitmore Sr. died on a Thursday in October, 18 months after Desta and Daniel's wedding. He had been ill for 2 years, a progressive neurological condition that had moved slowly at first and then accelerated in the final 8 months with a cruelty that felt personal. I had met Raymond 4 times. He was a compact, deliberate man who said less than he knew, which I respect. At Daniel and Desta's rehearsal dinner, he had pulled me aside. I remember this clearly and said, "Your daughter is good for my son. She makes him less afraid of things." I had not known Daniel was afraid of things. It was the kind of sentence that opens a door and doesn't explain what's behind it. "Thank you for raising her that way," he said. And he shook my hand in a grip that was still firm despite the tremor I could see beginning in his left hand. That was the last real conversation I had with Raymond Whitmore. The will was read 6 weeks after the funeral. Daniel called me that evening, which was unusual. Daniel communicates primarily through Desta, not directly with me, not out of coldness, but out of a natural reserve. When he called me directly, I sat down before I answered. "The land," he said. "Dad left the Route 7 property to me and Desta. Jointly. Both of us. Together. How does Beverly feel about that?" I said. A pause. "She was very calm," he said. "Daniel. She was very calm in the way of someone who has already decided what they're going to do about it," he said. That sentence. I think about it often. Because Daniel, quiet and careful Daniel who builds furniture and measures twice, had seen it too. He had felt the frequency. He just didn't know yet what it was pointing toward. I opened my notebook. I wrote, "The land is the trigger. Watch what she does next." What Beverly did next was not dramatic. It never is, with people like Beverly. Drama draws attention. Beverly operated in the margins. It started with documents. 3 weeks after the will was read, Beverly sent Desta a packet of papers through a courier, not through an attorney, just a courier, as though it were casual, with a cover letter explaining that she had spoken to a family friend in property law who had advised that the joint deed structure created unnecessary complications for estate management, and that it would be cleaner for everyone if Desta signed a quitclaim deed transferring her ownership interest to Daniel solely. Beverly wrote that Daniel had reviewed it and agreed. Desta called Daniel immediately. He had not reviewed it. He had not agreed. He had not known about the packet. Desta called me. I drove to Savannah that weekend. I sat at their kitchen table and read every page of that document packet with my reading glasses and my notebook open beside me. Then I called my brother Winston. Winston said, "Don't sign anything. Don't respond to Beverly directly. Let me make some calls." I told Desta and Daniel to do exactly that. Beverly followed up with a phone call 2 weeks later, this time to Daniel, saying that she was concerned the packet had gotten lost in the mail and just wanted to make sure the paperwork had arrived. Daniel told her it had. He told her they were reviewing it. Beverly said warmly, "Of course, take your time. I just want what's best for the family." I wrote that down verbatim. I just want what's best for the family. I have heard that sentence deployed before. It is never about the family. The second attempt was more direct. Beverly invited Desta to lunch, just the two of them, a gesture of connection, she said, at a restaurant in Savannah. Desta went, because Desta is a woman who extends good faith until she has specific reason not to. Over lunch, Beverly told Desta that she wanted to be honest with her about something. She said that Raymond's decision to include Desta on the deed had been made during a period when his illness had been affecting his judgment. She said she wasn't questioning Desta's character, but that the family needed to know the property was in Caldwell. She corrected herself, in Whitmore hands, for the sake of the children Daniel would eventually have, who would be full Whitmores. Full Whitmores. Desta told me about that lunch on the phone that night, and for the first time since the whole business had started, I heard something in my daughter's voice that was not frustration or confusion, but something closer to genuine hurt. She said, "Full Whitmores," Desta said. "I know, baby. Like my children won't be full enough." "I know." I sat with my notebook open, and I did not write anything for a long moment. Then I wrote, "This is not going to stop on its own." The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in August. Desta called me to say that Beverly had reached out to Daniel about a property matter. A surveyor had been scheduled to walk the boundary lines of the Route 7 land, something about a neighboring property's fence encroaching on the eastern edge. Daniel had a furniture delivery in Augusta that he couldn't reschedule, a commission he'd been working on for 4 months. Beverly said it was fine, that the surveyor just needed a property owner present for the walkthrough, that Desta could represent them both as joint deed holder. I asked Desta if Daniel had confirmed the surveyor appointment independently. She paused. "Beverly made the appointment. Did Daniel call the surveyor directly?" I asked. Another pause. "Mom, it's a property survey." "I know what it is," I said. "Did Daniel call the surveyor himself?" She was quiet. "I'll come with you," I said. "Mom."
Desta.
"It's a Saturday morning property walkthrough. Beverly will be there." I heard my own voice say the next thing before I'd fully decided to say it. "That's exactly why I want to come." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Fine. But you have to promise not to give Beverly that look." "What look?" "You know what look." I promised. And then on Friday evening, Desta called back to tell me that Beverly had texted her, not called, texted, to say the surveyor had rescheduled, that it was going to be a quick boundary walk, nothing formal, that it wasn't worth my long drive. I thought about Raymond's handshake at the rehearsal dinner. I thought about the folder of documents sent by courier. I thought about full Whitmores. I thought about the 14 months of entries in my notebook. I got in my car at 7:45 Saturday morning anyway. I drove to Route 7. I didn't tell Desta I was coming. I told myself I was just going to drive past, just to look, just to have eyes on the situation. When I reached the property, I slowed down without stopping. Desta's blue sedan was parked near the gate. Beverly's silver SUV was beside it. And behind the old equipment shed, partially concealed from the road, was a white pickup truck with no markings that I did not recognize. I drove past. I parked at a closed farm stand a half-mile down the road, in a pull-off that couldn't be seen from the property. I sat there. I watched the clock on my dashboard. I called Winston. He didn't answer. I left a message. At 10:22 a.m., Beverly's silver SUV passed me going north, toward town. Fast but not speeding. She did not look in my direction. Desta's car did not follow. I waited 4 minutes. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself Desta was probably still talking to the surveyor. I told myself there was a completely reasonable explanation. Then I started my car and drove back to the property. The gate was open. The white truck was gone. Desta's car was still there, driver's door hanging open. I found my daughter 30 yards down the access road, sitting against a fence post, one hand held against her chest, blood in her hair. The emergency room at Waynesboro Regional was 40 minutes from Route 7 at speed, and I drove it in 32. I held Desta's good hand the entire way, and I talked to her, not about what had happened, just talked about nothing, about the weather, about a book I had been reading, about what I was planning to plant in the fall garden, because her eyes needed somewhere to focus and her brain needed something to follow, and I needed to keep the part of myself that wanted to come apart sealed behind the part that knew how to drive. Dr. Miriam Asani was the attending physician. She had the bearing of a woman who had been delivering difficult information for long enough that she no longer softened it unnecessarily, which I appreciated. She told me, mild concussion, 2 broken fingers on the right hand, a laceration requiring 6 stitches at the hairline, deep bruising along the left ribcage consistent with blunt force impact against a hard surface. Early-stage swelling in the left orbital area suggesting she had been struck. The baby's heartbeat was strong, regular, steady. I asked Dr. Asani to document everything she observed in full detail, with photographs. She looked at me with the expression of a woman who understood exactly why I was asking. Already in progress, she said. I went into Desta's room, and I sat beside her bed, and I held the hand that wasn't splinted, and I waited while the machines confirmed what my own hands already knew, that my daughter was alive, that my grandchild was alive, and that someone had made a decision that morning that was going to cost them everything they had. Tell me what happened, I said. Desta looked at the ceiling. She has my way of gathering herself. Deep breath, chin level, eyes forward. There was no surveyor, she said. I know. Beverly had 2 men there I didn't know. She said she needed me to sign papers, the quitclaim, the same one from before. I said no. I told her I needed Daniel and an attorney present before I signed anything. She paused. She told me I didn't understand how families worked, that I was a guest in the Whitmore name, that guests didn't get to make decisions about property. I kept my face still, and then one of the men grabbed my arm. I fought. I don't, she stopped. I fell against the fence post, the metal corner. I think I blacked out for a few minutes. When I came to, they were gone. My phone was gone. I walked to the road. She turned her head and looked at me. Beverly left before they did, she said. She walked to her car while the men were still there. She didn't look back. She bought a bottle of water. I didn't know that yet. I would know it 2 days later, when Winston pulled the gas station security footage. But sitting in that hospital room listening to my daughter tell me that Beverly Whitmore had walked to her car and driven away while 2 men held my pregnant daughter's arm, I felt something settle in me that I can only describe as absolute clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't feel like anger, that feels, instead, like a compass finally finding north. Okay, I said. I squeezed Desta's hand. We're going to handle this, I said. All of it. Every piece of it. But first you're going to rest and let these doctors do their work. Can you do that? She closed her eyes. Yes, ma'am, she said. I walked out to the parking lot. I called Winston. He answered this time. I said 4 words. Winston, I need you. He said, I'm already driving. My brother Winston Hutchins is 56 years old. He spent 24 years as a special investigator with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, working financial crimes and organized fraud for the last 12 of those years before he retired to Savannah, where he grows tomatoes that he is aggressively proud of and does private consulting work that he describes as keeping his hand in, and that I suspect is considerably more substantial than that description implies. Winston is the most methodical person I have ever known. He is also the calmest. In a family that runs toward intensity, our mother was a passionate woman. Our father was opinionated about everything from politics to acceptable coffee temperatures. Winston came out somewhere else entirely. Still water. The kind of calm that doesn't mean absence but means depth. He arrived at the hospital at 11 p.m. with a large thermos of coffee, a yellow legal pad, and a recorder. He did not hug me when he arrived. He sat down across from me in the family waiting room, poured coffee into the thermos cap, handed it to me, and said, Start from the beginning. I started from the beginning. The wedding, the notebook, the courier packet, the lunch, the phone call about the survey, the white truck, the gate, finding Desta. Winston wrote on his legal pad without interrupting me. His pen moved steadily. When I finished, he looked at what he had written for a long moment, and then he looked up. The truck, he said. You said white, no markings. Did you see the plates? Georgia plates. I didn't get the number. I wasn't close enough. He nodded, wrote something. The gas station at Route 7 and Milburn. Does it have cameras? I thought. There's a camera above the fuel pumps. I've noticed it before. Winston wrote that down. Beverly left the property at 10:22, I said, before Desta walked to the road. You're sure of the time? I watched her pass my car. I looked at the dashboard clock. He wrote that down. Okay, he said. He capped his pen. Here's what we're going to do. The first thing Winston did that night, before he had even seen Desta, was call a colleague, a woman named Sandra Okafor, who had spent 8 years with the GBI's legal division before going into private civil litigation in Atlanta. Sandra was known for 3 things: exceptional preparation, an absolute refusal to be rushed, and a record in civil cases that made opposing counsel uncomfortable before the first filing. He called her at midnight. She answered. I am beginning to understand that the people in Winston's world keep unusual hours. He gave Sandra a 10-minute summary. She asked 4 questions. Then she said, "Send me everything you have in the morning. I'll pull the estate documents before noon." The second thing Winston did was drive to the Route 7 gas station at 7 a.m. before the Saturday morning shift change and asked to speak to the manager about their security footage. He identified himself as a former GI investigator. The manager, a man named Henry who had the cautious helpfulness of someone who once had a difficult experience with law enforcement and has since decided cooperation is the better philosophy, pulled the footage from the previous morning. Beverly Whitmore's silver SUV appeared on camera at 10:24 a.m., 2 minutes after she passed my parked car. She pulled up to the pumps. She got out. She went inside. She was on camera inside the store for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. She purchased 1 bottle of water, 1 pack of gum, and a scratch lottery ticket. She came out, got in her car, and drove north. My daughter was walking a quarter mile with a head wound and broken fingers at that exact moment. Winston sent me the screenshot of the timestamp. I looked at it for a long time. Then I printed it and put it in the filing system. The third thing, and this is the one Beverly had not anticipated, was the cell tower data. Winston had contacts at the GBI and knew which questions to ask, through which channels. The white truck's plates had been partially captured on the same gas station camera, enough for Winston's contact to run a partial match in the county vehicle registry. 2 trucks came back as possibilities. Both belonged to men with prior records. One of them, a man named Curtis Pell, had a 2019 conviction for aggravated assault that he had served 18 months on. Winston knew the name. He had worked a case adjacent to Curtis Pell 11 years earlier. He called a contact who knew where Curtis Pell was currently living. He drove there on Sunday morning. I was not present for that conversation, and Winston has never told me exactly what was said. What I know is that Curtis Pell gave a full statement to a GBI investigator, a friend of Winston's who made the drive as a personal favor, by Sunday afternoon. The statement confirmed that Beverly Whitmore had hired Curtis and another man named Davis Rowe to be present at the Route 7 property that Saturday morning to ensure that Desta Hutchins Whitmore signed a quitclaim deed transferring her ownership interest in the property and to handle the situation if she refused. Curtis said that things had gone further than intended when Desta fought back. I keep that phrase, further than intended, in a specific place in my mind. I have not done anything with it yet. I am saving it. By Monday morning, Sandra Okafor had pulled the complete Whitmore estate documentation. She called Winston while I was sitting across from him at the hospital cafeteria table. He put the call on speaker without ceremony. Sandra said, "The Route 7 property is deeded to Daniel Whitmore and Desta Hutchins Whitmore jointly, as stated. Beverly Whitmore has no legal interest in that property and never did. The quitclaim would have required both Daniel's cooperation and Desta's voluntary signature. Beverly had neither." "She knew that," I said. "She absolutely knew that," Sandra said. "She has her own attorney. But here's what I need you to stay on the line for, because I've been looking at the operating accounts." She paused in the way of a person organizing a large thing into the right sequence. Beverly Whitmore has been the sole signatory on the Whitmore family operating accounts since 2009. Raymond added her as primary signatory while he was still healthy, which was standard for family businesses. What is not standard is what she did with that access. Winston leaned forward slightly. I watched his face. Over a period of 6 years, from 2016 through last year, there were 47 transfers from the Whitmore operating accounts to an LLC called Whitmore Heritage Consulting. The transfers ranged from $4,000 to $28,000. Total, $383,000. I said, "What is Whitmore Heritage Consulting?" "It's an LLC Beverly formed in 2015 under a variation of her maiden name, Beverly Hargrove Whitmore, filing as B. Hargrove Consulting, registered in South Carolina." There is no consulting business. There are no clients. The LLC received money from the Whitmore family accounts, and the money was used for Beverly's personal expenses, renovations on her home, a vehicle purchase, travel. The cafeteria was quiet around us. Someone dropped a tray somewhere behind me. I heard it as if it were very far away. She was stealing from Raymond, I said. She was stealing from Raymond while Raymond was alive, Sandra said, including during the period when his illness was affecting his cognition. Winston looked at me across the table. That's financial elder abuse, he said. Not a question. That's financial elder abuse, Sandra confirmed. And wire fraud, because the transfers moved across state lines through the South Carolina LLC. I'm going to refer this to the GBI Financial Crimes Unit today. But Lorraine, her voice changed slightly, the way voices change when someone is about to say something they consider important. The reason Beverly wanted Desta off that deed was not just about the land. The audit trail, I said. Desta, as a joint deed holder, has standing to request a full accounting of the estate assets. If she had ever exercised that right, or hired an attorney who suggested she do so, the transfers would have surfaced immediately. Beverly wasn't just trying to take the land. She was trying to eliminate the one person who could legally force an audit. I thought about my daughter walking a quarter-mile with a head wound in August heat. I thought about a bottle of water and a scratch lottery ticket. She hurt my daughter, I said slowly, to protect a theft. Yes, Sandra said. That is exactly what happened. Here is the thing about Raymond Whitmore that I did not know until the investigation was 3 weeks old. He had known. Not everything. Not the full scope. But Raymond Whitmore, the quiet man who measured twice and said less than he knew, had suspected his daughter Beverly of financial irregularities for 2 years before he died. He had not confronted her. He was ill, and Beverly managed his medications, and I think Raymond was a man who understood his own vulnerability and chose his battles with the precise caution of someone who knows he is running out of time. Instead, he had done what careful men do. He hired a private accountant, a retired forensic accountant named Gerald Hatch, who had worked financial investigations for the state for 30 years before opening a small private practice in Augusta. Raymond had met Gerald through a timber industry association and trusted him. He had given Gerald access to 6 months of account statements under the pretense of routine estate planning. Gerald had found the pattern within 3 weeks. Raymond had taken Gerald's report and put it in a folder. He had added to that folder copies of the LLC registration documents he had found through his own research, his own handwritten notes, dated and initialed, and a letter, a handwritten letter, for pages, addressed to Daniel. In that letter, Raymond told his son everything he had found. He told him that he had not gone to law enforcement because he was afraid of what the stress of a criminal investigation would do to his remaining time, and because he had hoped, even then, that Beverly might stop if she knew Raymond had seen something. He told Daniel that if he was reading this letter, it meant Raymond had run out of time to finish what he started. And he wrote, "I don't know who will find this or when, but someone who loves you will find it eventually. Someone who pays attention. Keep the letter. Use what's in this folder. Make sure Beverly is accountable. I was not able to do it myself, and I am sorry for that." He had given the folder to Beverly for safekeeping 3 months before he died, inside a box of what he described as tax records and property documents. Beverly had locked it in a filing cabinet in her spare bedroom without opening it. Raymond Whitmore had trusted that his daughter's own greed would eventually lead investigators to the folder. He had been right. When Beverly was arrested and her home was searched, the folder was the 3rd item logged in the evidence inventory. Winston called me when Sandra called him about the letter. I was at Desta's kitchen table drinking coffee when my phone rang. "Lorraine," Winston said. "You need to sit down." I was already sitting. He told me about the letter. He read me the last paragraph. When he finished, I sat in my daughter's kitchen, and I looked at the wall for a long time. He was building the case, I said, from inside the family, while he was dying. He trusted that someone would finish it, Winston said. I thought about the rehearsal dinner. Raymond's handshake. "Your daughter is good for my son. She makes him less afraid of things." He hadn't just been making conversation. He had been looking at me. He had been taking my measure. He had been deciding whether I was the kind of person who paid attention. He counted on me, I said. Not with ego, with weight. He didn't know your name, Winston said. But yes, he counted on someone exactly like you. There is one more thing I haven't told you. Claudette Whitmore, Daniel's aunt, the woman who makes the sweet potato pie, the woman who called me about the family photograph, had been at a property adjacent to Route 7 that Saturday morning. She had not been anywhere near the Whitmore property. She had been visiting a friend who owned the farm 2 parcels east. But she had driven Route 7 to get there, and she had a habit, as she described it to Winston, of paying attention to things along roads she knew well. She had seen Beverly's silver SUV parked at the Whitmore property gate at 9 a.m. She had noted it without stopping. It was Beverly's property, Beverly's car. Nothing unusual. But she had also seen, when she drove back past at 10:30 a.m., that Beverly's car was gone. Desta's car was still there with the door open, and a woman she couldn't quite identify was walking slowly along the fence line with her head down. She had slowed. She had told herself she was imagining that something was wrong. She had driven home. For 3 weeks after Desta's hospitalization, Claudette had said nothing. She had carried what she had seen in the particular way of people who are afraid that what they saw means something they are not ready to confront about someone they love. Then she called me. She called my cell phone directly, not Winston's, not Sandra's. Mine, she said, Lorraine, I need to tell you something I should have told someone sooner. And I need you to tell me what to do with it. I said, tell me everything. She did. I said, you're going to need to give a statement. She said, I know. She said, I've known Beverly my whole adult life. I've known her for 31 years. I've been telling myself she couldn't have, that she wouldn't have. She stopped. But she did, didn't she? Yes, I said. She did. Claudette gave her statement to Sandra's investigative team the following week. She was not a dramatic witness. She was better than dramatic. She was precise, specific, and utterly without motive to fabricate, a member of Beverly's own family, with 31 years of relationship at stake, describing exactly what she had seen on Route 7 at 10:30 a.m. It was the last piece of the case that needed filling. Sandra told me afterward. With Claudette's testimony, Beverly's defense has no room left. She was the last person on that road. She saw your daughter, and she drove away. I thought about Beverly at the gas station. The water, the gum, the scratch lottery ticket. Good, I said. Beverly Whitmore was arrested on a Wednesday morning at her home in Savannah. I know this because Winston called me while I was sitting on Desta's porch watching my daughter read in the backyard, her splinted hand resting on the enormous geography of her belly, her face turned up to the morning light in the particular way of people who've been through something terrible and are learning, carefully, to trust ordinary moments again. It's done, Winston said. I said, all of it, aggravated battery, conspiracy to commit coercion, 3 counts wire fraud, financial elder abuse of a disabled adult. She was taken from her home at 8:15 a.m. I looked at Desta in the yard. The elder abuse charge will carry mandatory minimums, Winston said. Sandra thinks, conservatively, 9 years. More likely 11 to 12 with the fraud count stacked. I said, did she say anything when they arrested her? Winston was quiet for a moment. She asked to call her attorney, he said. That was all. No protestation. No crying. No, I didn't mean for it to go this far, or this is a misunderstanding, or any of the things that people say when they are surprised by consequences. Just the attorney's number. I thought about what that said about a person. I thought about a woman who could drive away from a gate and stop for a scratch lottery ticket and now, faced with handcuffs, reach not for explanation but for the mechanism most likely to minimize damage. I thought about Raymond's letter in that folder. Make sure Beverly is accountable. I was not able to do it myself. Winston, I said. Yeah. We did it. He said, you did it, Lorraine. I just helped carry the bags. Desta went into labor 4 weeks after Beverly's arrest. She called me at 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday, not Daniel, me first, which I noted and filed away in the part of my heart reserved for things that matter. Daniel drove her to the hospital, and I was there in 40 minutes. Winston drove from Savannah and arrived by 5 a.m. with sandwiches and a thermos and the Louis L'Amour novel he had apparently been carrying in his car for 3 months. The labor lasted 14 hours. I sat in the waiting room with Daniel, who was quiet in the particular way of people who are conducting a private negotiation with God and are not sure of the terms. We didn't talk much. Winston read his novel. I graded a stack of essays I had brought because I knew myself well enough to know I needed something for my hands. At 4:22 p.m., Dr. Asani, who had, by some alignment of schedule that I choose to believe was not accidental, been on shift at Waynesboro Regional that day, came to the waiting room door and smiled with her whole face, which I had not seen her do before. "A boy," she said. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. "Everybody is doing beautifully." Daniel made a sound I cannot describe. It was not a word. It was the sound of a man discovering that something he had been afraid to fully hope for had, in fact, happened. Winston looked up from his novel. He looked at me. He nodded once, the way our father used to nod when something had gone right that needed to go right. When they let me in to hold my grandson, he looked up at me with the ancient, evaluating expression of someone who has just arrived in a new place and is already forming opinions about it. "Hello," I told him. "You have no idea what this family went through to get you here safe." He gripped my finger with a force that was, frankly, startling. "They named him Raymond." Daniel said it without ceremony, simply, "We're going to call him Raymond." And Desta looked at her husband for a moment and said, "Yes, that's right. Raymond Whitmore Jr., he is 5 months old now. He has his mother's eyes and his father's deliberateness. Even at 5 months, he considers things before responding to them, and a grip strength that his pediatrician mentioned, with some admiration, at his last checkup. The trial ran 9 months. I attended every session that I could manage, sitting in the second row behind the prosecution, bringing my grading when the procedural portions ran long. Beverly's defense was built on 3 arguments. First, that Desta had been on the property voluntarily. Second, that the altercation had been an accident that Beverly had not anticipated or directed. Third, that the financial transfers had been authorized by Raymond as gifts and compensation for Beverly's years of managing the family business. The first argument collapsed against Claudette's testimony. A member of Beverly's own family, calm and precise, and carrying the unmistakable weight of someone telling a truth that costs her something, describing what she had seen on Route 7 at 10:30 a.m., was not a witness the defense could discredit. The second argument collapsed against the text messages. Sandra's team had subpoenaed Beverly's phone records early. There were 19 texts between Beverly and Curtis Pell in the 72 hours before the Saturday meeting. None of them said, in plain language, "Hurt this woman." But several of them were specific enough to eliminate accident as a defense. The most significant, sent at 8:47 a.m. the morning of the attack, read, "She is going to refuse. Make sure she understands she has no choice." And the most damning, sent at 10:31 a.m., 9 minutes after Beverly drove past the gas station and 4 minutes after she purchased her water and lottery ticket, read simply, "Resolved?" Curtis Pell had replied, "Yes, resolved." The jury heard that exchange and deliberated for 7 hours. The third argument, the financial authorization defense, required Beverly to claim that 47 transfers to a shell company she had registered under a pseudonym across 6 years had been explicitly authorized by a man who was, in the final 2 years, cognitively impaired. Sandra put Gerald Hatch, Raymond's private accountant, on the stand for 3 hours. Gerald was 71 years old, recently retired, and had the meticulous, unbothered patience of a man who has spent 50 years making numbers tell the truth. He walked the jury through every transfer. He explained the shell structure. He explained why legitimate compensation payments do not require secret out-of-state LLC registration. And then Sandra put Raymond's letter into evidence. She read 4 paragraphs aloud. The courtroom was very quiet. Beverly Whitmore was convicted on all counts. The sentencing was 3 weeks later. 11 years, with mandatory minimums on the elder abuse and wire fraud charges ensuring she would serve at minimum 7. The $383,000 in fraudulent transfers was ordered repaid in full as part of a civil judgment that Sandra had run parallel to the criminal case. The Route 7 property remains in Daniel and Desta's name. All 300 acres. People ask me, and they do ask, now that the verdict is public, whether I feel satisfied, whether it feels like justice. I want to be honest about this, because I think dishonesty about it would be a disservice to everyone who has ever sat where I sat. 11 years does not give me back the image of my daughter sitting against that fence post with blood in her hair. 7 years of mandatory minimum does not undo the sound of her voice telling me that Beverly walked to her car while the men were still there. No sentence resolves the fact that my grandson's first months of existence were shadowed by a trial, that Desta's pregnancy, which should have been a time of ordinary, unearned joy, was instead a time of depositions and courtroom attendance and the particular exhaustion of being a victim navigating a system that moves slowly regardless of urgency. What I feel is not triumph. What I feel is closer to the thing that happens when a very long storm finally passes and you go outside and the air is changed and you can breathe without bracing. What I feel is it is finished. Finished properly, finished completely, finished in a way that closes the door and keeps it closed. Beverly Whitmore is in a Georgia State Correctional Facility. She will not be at Thanksgiving. She will not be at Raymond's first birthday. She will not send packets through couriers or texts about surveyors or make comments about full Whitmores. She is gone from our lives as completely as it is possible to remove a person who chose, of her own will, to make herself a threat to my daughter. Raymond Sr. wanted accountability. He has it. Winston came for Thanksgiving. He held Raymond Jr. for approximately 4 hours and told everyone who would listen about the tomatoes he was planning for spring with the specific intensity of a man who is using tomatoes to avoid crying at the baby. Nobody called him on it. After dinner, after Daniel had taken Raymond upstairs for his bath and Desta had drifted asleep on the living room couch in the sudden, total way of new mothers, Winston and I sat on the back porch with decaf coffee and the quiet that belongs to people who have known each other for more than 50 years. The Georgia night air was cool and smelled like pine and coming rain. Somewhere down the street, someone was burning leaves. Mama would have handled this the same way, Winston said finally. Filed everything. Called the right people. Sat in that courtroom every single day. Mama would have been considerably less patient with the process, I said. He laughed. Real laughter. The kind that comes from somewhere deep. We were quiet for a while. You know what I think about, he said, when I think about how this ended? Raymond's letter, I said. Raymond's letter, he confirmed. A man who was running out of time, who couldn't finish what he started, who put everything he had into a folder and trusted that somebody who loved his son would find it. He looked at his coffee. He didn't know your name. He didn't know you existed. He just trusted that Daniel would find someone worth trusting. I thought about that rehearsal dinner handshake. Your daughter is good for my son. She makes him less afraid of things. He knew, I said. Winston looked at me. He shook my hand at the rehearsal dinner, I said. He looked at me for about 10 seconds longer than a normal handshake. I thought he was just being gracious. I paused. He was deciding something. Winston was quiet. He was deciding if I was the kind of person who paid attention, I said. Winston nodded slowly. And you were. Inside, I heard Daniel singing something foolish to the baby upstairs, one of those made-up songs that parents sing that have no tune and no logic and are, for that very reason, perfect. I heard Desta laugh at him from the couch, drowsily, the laugh of a woman who is home and safe and knows it. My grandson, named for a man who tried to protect his family and trusted that someone would finish the job. My daughter, who walked a quarter-mile on a dirt road with a head wound because there was no other option, who cried for 30 seconds in a hospital parking lot and then stood up. My brother, who drove 4 hours in the middle of the night and brought sandwiches nobody touched and a legal pad and put it all to work. And me, Lorraine Hutchins, retired schoolteacher, keeper of notebooks, woman who drove past Route 7 on a Saturday morning on a feeling she almost ignored. You did good, Lorraine, Winston said. We did good, I said. He shook his head. You stayed standing. Every single day, you stayed standing. I thought about that for a long time. Maybe that is the only answer any of us have when someone decides that the people we love are acceptable losses. You don't fall apart in front of anyone who needs you standing. You document. You call the right people. You sit in the second row every single day until it is finished. And when Beverly Whitmore's attorney tried to argue, in the sentencing phase, that his client deserved leniency because she had lived a life of service to her family, I sat in the second row with my notebook on my knee, and I thought about a woman buying a scratch lottery ticket while my daughter walked to the road alone. I wrote one line in my notebook that day. I haven't shown it to anyone. It says, "That bottle of water cost her 11 years. And it was worth every single penny." Raymond Whitmore Jr. will be 1 year old next month. Desta asked me what I wanted to give him for his birthday. I told her I already gave him everything. I kept him safe before he had a name. And that is the story of how a retired schoolteacher, a yellow legal pad, and a notebook full of dates brought down a woman who thought she was untouchable. If this story moved you, if it made you think of someone you know, or if it reminded you of your own fight, please share it. Someone out there needs to hear that justice is possible. That careful, methodical, documented love wins. And if you are new here, welcome. Every story we tell on this channel is real, human, and told with the respect it deserves. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss what comes next. We have more stories to tell, and every single one of them matters. Leave a comment below and tell us, which part of this story hit you hardest? Was it the gas station footage? Raymond's letter? Or the moment Lorraine found her daughter on that dirt road? We read every single comment. Everyone, thank you for watching. Thank you for staying until the end. It means more than you know. Until next time, stay standing.